Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The guy who wrote the dossier was working for the Clinton campaign. Well, we heard about the truth about the Steele dossier this week when the Inspector General told us it was all garbage, rubbish, all made up.
He didn't tell them that. Donald Trump's Republican defenders' tactic of screaming out debunked conspiracy theories on the Steele dossier did nothing to prevent his impeachment. But they do give us the opportunity to dive back into one of the most intriguing elements of the Trump-Russia scandal, the emergence of the Steele dossier. And joining me now are two of the experts on said dossier, Glenn Simpson and Peter Fritsch. They are the founders of Fusion GPS and the authors of the new book, Crime in Progress. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And at the risk of disturbing your ears even further, now let me play you one other person screaming about the dossier, and that will be Donald Trump. And this was him at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania recently. Take a listen.
The Inspector General's shocking report proved that the Obama FBI obtained secret warrants to spy on my campaign based on a phony foreign dossier of debunked smears paid for by crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. The FBI failed to disclose the nature of the political hit job to the FISA court. They hid it, they deceived it, and they lied.
Okay, well, none of that is true. But Glenn, I'll start with you first. I don't even know where to begin, but you go ahead and begin. What was the original origin of Christopher Steele's research on Donald Trump, and who paid for it?
The origin of the research into Donald Trump started in September of 2015, and it was financed by the Republicans. The first half of our investigation was all paid for by the Republicans. The reason that we hired Christopher Steele was that we did about 8 months of research for the Republicans, which led us ultimately to become very curious about Donald Trump's connections to the Russians.
Yeah, and in fact, the idea that, Steele, Peter, I'll give this one to you. The idea that this guy, Christopher Steele, who was hired, was this anti-Trump, horrible person who hated Donald Trump and went out to try to smear and make up lies about him, the opposite appears to be true. This is a quote from the Inspector General's report, which, by the way, for the audience, found the opposite of what all these Republicans are saying, that the Steele dossier was not the source of the investigation. It simply was not. But it quotes, Steele called the allegation that he was biased against Trump from the start ridiculous. He stated that, if anything, he was favorably disposed toward the Trump family before he began his research, because he had visited a Trump family member at Trump Tower and had been friendly with the family member for some years. He described their relationship as personal and said that he once gifted a family tartan, a tartan from Scotland to the family member. Peter, can you tell us, do you know who that family member is? There's been a lot of speculation about who that is, because it sounds like both the person who originally funded the Steele research and Steele himself were basically pro-Trump, or pro-Republican, at least.
Yeah, we all think it's Ivanka Trump, and I think it's more an acquaintanceship than a friendship. Kris is a super polite British person who, when contacted, reciprocates and often will. I mean, if you wrote him today, Joy, you'd get a Christmas card in the next week. So it's important to remember, though, that Kris, when he was hired by us, we were working for Donald Trump, which is a super germane fact that people elide.
Mm-hmm. Working against Donald Trump. I mean, we didn't tell him who our client was.
Yeah. Right. So he didn't know who the ultimate client was.
No, we didn't tell him. I mean, it became obvious eventually. But no, it's a part of tradecraft that you wouldn't tell someone who is a subcontractor, who the client is. You wouldn't want to influence their thinking. But I was just talking to Kris about this the other day, and I think he mentioned the fact that he was friendly with Ivanka the very first time we met. He certainly had no animus against them. I mean, what we've said previously in testimony and other places is that, to the extent that there was a opinion that was formed about Donald Trump's fitness to be president of the United States, it was formed during the course of the research. Yeah. And the reason that Kris was so concerned about Donald Trump becoming president was because of what we were finding about him, which was really scary.
And that is what I want to get to now. There's a Washington Post piece that sort of compares what the Mueller report found and what Steele found. And I'll just read a little bit of it. The Mueller report substantiates the core reporting and many of the specifics in Steele's 2016 memoranda, including that Trump campaign figures were secretly meeting with Kremlin figures, that Russia was conducting a covert operation to elect Donald Trump, and that the aim of the Russian operation was to sow discord and disunity in the U.S. and within the transatlantic alliance. Peter, go through a little bit more of what Mr. Steele actually found.
I mean, first of all, mission accomplished, right? I mean, that's exactly what they managed to do, the Russians. Kris's inquiry was really broad-based. In the beginning, we talk about this kind of extensively early on in our book. He was meant to figure out why it is he kept going to Russia without actually consummating any deals. And what he found was a systematic, what he believed his sources said was a systematic program to work with the Trump Organization campaign to get him elected. Of course, that finding was about 8 months ahead of the intelligence community's finding. So, there are details that get quibbled about in the dossier, but the underlying sort of gestalt of the thing has been more than borne out. Yeah,
and Glenn, go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, the clips that you played are truly amazing. I mean, the most amazing thing about those clips is that, they sink in with people if you lie enough times. Yeah. As Adolf Hitler proved, some people start to believe these lies.
Well, believe it. I want to talk about one of the things that is the sort of the detail in the Steele dossier that keeps coming up. And that is this idea that there are tapes that Russia may have of Donald Trump that they could use as compromise against him. There's an intriguing footnote in the Mueller report about tapes that they don't describe. Were you all ever able to, or was he able to substantiate the existence of any kind of tapes of Trump that Russia could use against him?
Well, so, that was news to us and to Kris, that footnote that you're alluding to. What we know definitively is that Donald Trump lied about, his presence in Moscow, in that hotel. His bodyguard, Keith Schiller, did in fact later testify to being offered prostitutes that evening. So, there's a lot of, as we also write in the book, there's no fewer than about 7 sources that we know of who substantiated that claim. So Kris and his colleagues had quite a robust discussion about whether to include it. He, as a former intelligence professional, decided that, if there was existing compromise that could be used as leverage against...
But I mean, honestly, there's a kind of a who cares aspect of this, which is, that's not really the core of what Kris's reporting was. The core of Kris's reporting was that the Kremlin was conspiring to elect Donald Trump president of the United States, and Donald Trump was, supportive of that and going along with it, and, was involved in all kinds of things with the Russians, including business deals, which now we now know to be true.
It is Monday, the 16th of December of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. We've sliced and diced and made quite another gourmet dish for you this Monday. Quite a bit happened over the weekend, least of which Donald Trump, I don't know. Is he degrading? Yeah, he's degrading. Okay, well, the report from the Judiciary Committee came out, and it looks like wire fraud is one of the crimes, a federal crime, that he is being impeached over. Quite a few federal offenses that rise to an actual crime. Oh, you don't think that these are crimes? Well, we'll show you what these are. They're crimes. And here's the criminal code that backs it up. So really all that Trump's defenders will have is that he is above the law. I believe that maybe we should stop calling the Republicans and just call them the monarchists. That's what they want. I have actually argued since really I was a small child. Well, not such a small child. I was actually a pretty big kid. Ever since I was about junior high, that the British have not tried to get us back into the United Kingdom. They have not stopped since we kicked them out. They came back in 1812 and we kicked their asses out again. And everybody thinks, oh, well, that was the end of it. No. Just like the Civil War never ended, because how else is it that our military bases are named after rebel, treasonous generals who fought against the United States, for example? So the Brits have never stopped. They want us under the thumb of a king or queen. And apparently the Republican Party has been their long-time companion in effecting that change back to the old order. Not Lincoln's Republicans, mind you. You know what I mean. The monarchists back in the day were called loyalists. The rest of us were patriots. So whenever you hear the term loyalists, think of your Republican family member who would turn you in for treason because you wanted self-governance. When those who have authoritarian disease, yeah, it is a disease. Those who have an unconscious, obsessive need to be told what to do. And then, not only that, but to kiss the ass of that person telling them what to do. Okay. Do you take out the cult leader, or do you have a intervention with the cultist? One wonders which one will work. I say go after that cult leader. That's one way to do it. I think probably the most effective way. Of course, some would say it's like hitting an asteroid that's coming at the Earth, and you hit it with some sort of big explosive device, maybe a nuke. So instead of one object, you have lots and lots and lots of objects coming at you. Maybe they'll be small enough to be burned up in the atmosphere and we won't have to worry about it. A few will get through. You know that. So it's just like taking out the cult leader. You're going to have a lot of extra debris coming at you. Hopefully they'll burn up in the atmosphere. Hopefully. Well, there's much more going on in the world. Of course, at the top, that was Glenn Simpson and Peter Fritsch of Fusion GPS putting the lie to the GOP attempts to, if anything was in the Steele dossier, which was not a dossier, it was a raw data compilation. God, it just bugs me. But regardless, the Steele report, anything that came out of that has been discredited. No, it's never been discredited. In fact, everything about it has come true or been verified. I know. What about the pee? What about the pee scene? That's just put up there as a distraction. That's the thing that the Republicans, the GOP, the authoritarians are going to latch on. You know that. God. You just do one little thing and they're going to say, you're just so salacious. So the rest of the report is supposed to now be invalid because of that. Well, it turns out that Schiller, Trump's body man. Now, I remember reading these reports way back in the day that Schiller testified that, they were offered prostitutes the night in question, but he didn't really say whether they got in the room or not. Or did he? Notice we don't get to hear about that too much. Because ultimately, that's not what the Steele report is about. The Steele report is basically showing that people started getting their hair on fire because the Russians were going to install Trump as the president of the United States, and they succeeded. And now we have the whole of the Republican Party going to argue that, sure, Trump is the only person in America that has to be affected by these laws. Why can't he be like everybody else? Now, really? Are you serious? That's what Lindsey Graham is arguing about his taxes. Why do the laws towards Trump have to be different than everybody else? Yeah, exactly. Why do the laws towards Trump have to be different than everybody else? That's our question, Lindsey. Except what he's arguing is something that's not true. He thinks the rest of us aren't required to give up our tax records. Yeah, you want to buy a house, Lindsey? You're going to be giving up your tax records. And a lot of other stuff, too. You want to open up a corporation? Yep. You want to sit on the board of a corporation? Yep. Everybody's got to follow these tax laws and disclosure. If somebody committed suicide in the closet of your house in 1944, you got to disclose that in California, even though the house might have been owned by 5 people before you or more. If it happened, you got to disclose it. Only mobsters don't want that disclosed, and I suppose 63 million decided that they would just love to have a mobster run this government, because self-governance is really a drag, especially when those people are self-governing and telling us what to do. Yeah, what have we ever told them what to do? How about being a good neighbor and stop lynching people and setting them on fire? Can you just, stop doing that? No, we have a God-given right. Okay. Also, just as a little personal aside, we've got the Navy midshipmen. Maybe it was the Marines, but these young kids at the Navy-Army football game flashing the Pepe sign. And of course, now we've got all the Vichy apologists saying, that's not Nazi, that's not white supremacy, that's just made up. It's just to trigger the liberals. Bah, 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 bah. Well, as Dennis DeClaudio said, if a bunch of Nazis and white supremacists say that wearing a fried egg on your head is really a sign to other white supremacists and Nazis that you're one of them, then wearing a fried egg on your head is a symbol of white nationalism and Nazi stuff. Okay, come on. That was my argument with people out here who said, oh, it's just the liberals making shit up. No. If it's just us making stuff up, why do the Nazis and the white supremacists use it so much to say hi to each other? Huh? All right. Well, those kids should lose their commission as far as I'm concerned. And every Nazi in our military needs to be rooted out. Maybe spend some time in the brig before they're let out in polite company. And that's not just my monarchist idea. Look, I'm an enlightened despot. I know I would be the exact opposite of what this country needs if I was poet, philosopher, king running everything. Poet, philosopher, kings are enlightened enough to know that they're the last people you want running everything. I mean, we could run it pretty good. But until you have a navy like Byron, you know, your ability to really govern over a vast territory might be questionable in your poet, philosopher, king throne. I like the idea of putting it out there to everybody and saying, hey, what's our consensus? It's called democracy. I want my democracy back. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, in the Bistro Cafe, we started off with the GPS Fusion guys debunking all those lies. I mean, they're so brazen when they lie. God, I'm getting quite upset about it, actually. On the rest of the menu, Kris Kobach's voter suppression database has been suspended for the foreseeable future. Yeah, we'll see how foreseeable it is, because it might be, quite foreseeable. The Pentagon will investigate whether it was legal for Trump to use active U.S. troops at the border. The military knows that you can't violate posse comitatus. They do. At least we have somebody with some kind of ethics. And 7 years after the shooting that left 26 of their friends and family dead, Newtown students are turning to activism. And you know what? They just won the state title in football. Those little kids who went to that school are now high schoolers. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the U.S. covertly expelled 2 officials from the Chinese embassy earlier this year after they drove onto a military base and said, "Oh, we're lost." Sure they are. And Nicola Sturgeon warned Boris Johnson he cannot keep Scotland in the Union against its will. And I'm not talking Mel Gibson here. I'm talking Nicola Sturgeon. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. This is not a money-making operation, but your generosity sure helps us pay the bills. And we'll give you some other program notes at the end of this spiel about the holidays. But for now, I just need to tell you, we would be unable to do any of this Resistance Radio without you. And we probably need you now more than ever. And you've heard my spiel before about machinery that needs to be replaced, and the attendant software as well. And also just the fixed cost of paying the bills, which seems to not be such a fixed cost because it goes up and you're fixed to pay it. So I guess it is a fixed cost after all. Yes, it is. And your generosity, once again, your help has enabled us to be able to do all of that, to pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue resisting as the founders originally intended so many, almost an eon ago now. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and that seems an appropriate place to follow me, so do. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and they get that linked up on social media. So go ahead and follow me on Twitter or wherever. What else? Oh, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, because I post the show notes and links diary on there too. And most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, the good and the bad. Alrighty. Okay, program note about the holidays, that's next week. I am going to turn the radio station into a robot station of sorts, starting Christmas Eve day at some point. And I'm going to drive up north, and even if there's weather, I got chains, and the car has all-wheel drive, so we'll see how we fare. Regardless, this is the first Christmas the kids are going to be without their dad. And me too. So it's most important that I get up there. So up there being, well, further north up Oregon and Salem from Southern Oregon, where I am here in Rogue River Valley. And so Tuesday, and I may come back on Friday. I'm not certain, but whatever happens with David's show will still fall in its regular time, and you'll get a mix of, well, holiday programming and our regular national feeds who do come in on the clock. Thank goodness for that. So I'll fill in more and post more info about that on social media and fill you in about it here as well, so stay tuned. All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. And it is by anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press, which they tend to be. A much criticized database that checks whether voters are registered in multiple states has been suspended for, quote, the foreseeable future, end quote, until security safeguards are put in place as part of a settlement of a federal lawsuit. The Interstate Cross-Check Program was the subject of a class action lawsuit. We still have those? They haven't got rid of them yet? Class action lawsuit by the American Civil Liberties Union of Kansas on behalf of 945 voters whose partial Social Security numbers were exposed by Florida officials through an open records request. Oops. That's a federal offense now, isn't it? Yes, it is. Kansas has operated the multi-state program since 2005. Although the program hasn't been used since 2017, when a Homeland Security audit discovered security vulnerabilities. The settlement includes a list of safeguards the state has agreed to implement to protect voters' personal info before the program can resume, the ACLU said in a news release. Oh, why not get rid of the whole thing? Come on. Kansas has agreed not to resume operating cross-check until all security upgrades recommended by DHS have been implemented and industry standard encryption practices are adopted. Industry? Can we please get our electoral voting machines out of the hands of private parties making a profit? Because, you know, whoever pays the most is going to get the service. And right now it seems like foreign actors, most of them hostile, have paid the price. They paid the bill. What was it that Khrushchev said? Paraphrasing now, of course. When I come to America to grind the capitalist under the heel of my iron boot, you can rest assured he'll sell me the rope that I hang him with first. Even more anonymous worker bees from the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, the Pentagon's going to investigate whether it was legal for Trump to station several thousand active duty troops along the border. The Pentagon's Independent Investigations Office says it will evaluate the legality. And Glenn Fine, the acting Inspector General, announced that his probe will assess several aspects of the military's border mission, which some in Congress call a misuse of the military. Well, yeah, it's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. I guess we don't have that anymore. And Fine said he will look at what the troops are doing at the border, what training they received for the mission, and whether the use at the border is legal. Well, I would look at the legality part first. For more than a year, the administration has placed several thousand active duty troops along the border to perform various missions in connection with Trump's campaign to clamp down on illegal entries. You mean keep the asylum seekers out because they're brown people? We don't want brown people invading our country. Don't call me racist. The troops have erected wire barriers, assisted with border surveillance, and performed other functions in support of DHS. Oh, you mean you're on private property that goes right up and across the Rio Grande? You're putting up fences along that part of America? Did you pay the price for a taking as spelled out in the Constitution? You know, there's a lot of eminent domain seizures in Texas, and I know that Texans don't like that. I'd like to hear more of that. Really, I would. In a letter to Fine in September, 33 House members urged an investigation of what they call the misuse and politicization of the military at the border. Now, under federal law, the military may not be used for domestic law enforcement purposes, but the Trump administration's view is that the troops are in a national security role at the border because we're being invaded by asylum seekers. They're all frauds. They're fakes. They're not running for their lives. They're coming here to vote for the Democrats. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. They were children themselves when they lost siblings, friends, and schoolmates in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Too young to comprehend the massacre, they spent years in shock and denial. 7 years later, some young people in Newtown, still struggling with the trauma, are emerging as new voices for school safety and gun violence prevention. The activism, they say, has been a way to turn something horrific into something positive. Now, we all remember 20 first-grade students and 6 of their educators were killed inside the school on December 14th, 2012, by a gunman in one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. And let me remind folks, those 6 educators threw their bodies in front of their students, and the bullets passed through their bodies and killed the kids. We have a constitutional right to carry a gun around like that, just in case now, don't we? Some stories from the victims' siblings and students who were in the school at the time of the shooting followed in this story here. Testimonials about what they went through that day. Some as young as 7. They were first and second graders themselves in other classrooms, and they had survived. Some actually hid in closets, and the gunman, Lanza, did not find them. I suggest go to the links in my show notes and links diary and read these. It made me cry. And you'll understand why, rather than having a grieving session with each other, they've decided, well, why don't we take that thing that is the implement of our family and friends and educators' deaths? Why don't we do something about that? I think it's a noble cause. But if past is prologue, at least out here in Southern Oregon, they'll just be accused of being backed by Soros, because Soros is funding everything bad in the world and wants to take your rights away. Just don't call the Soros meme anti-Semitic because he comes from Europe and European Jews aren't Semites. Every anti-Jew and anti-Semite knows that, don't they? All right, we better get to our break. And when we get back from our break, we are going to go through weather from around the world. And we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Murder Most Fun. Knives Out is a smart murder mystery/comedy that also delivers some cutting social commentary. Plot-wise, Christopher Plummer's character, Harlan Thrombey, is a successful mystery writer who dies unexpectedly from an apparent suicide. However, mysterious private investigator Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig with a southern drawl, is convinced that Thrombey has been murdered. Exactly who has hired Blanc is a mystery to everybody, including Blanc himself, but as he digs into Harlan's life and those around him, he uncovers that Harlan had as many skeletons as a character from one of his novels. As a wealthy patriarch, he's supporting his entire family, including his adult children and their families. Even his allegedly self-made realtor daughter, Linda, played to a T by Jamie Lee Curtis, is dependent on Daddy. And of course, they all have secrets. Indeed, the only person in Harlan's world who isn't there for a handout is his loyal immigrant nurse, Marta, who also has a secret. While the film is an effective whodunit, it's also a sharp critique of race, class, and family dynamics. Even the use of the term family comes under scrutiny, as the whole crew patronizingly calls Marta family, yet can't remember where she's from. Watching the family members turn on each other over their inheritance makes for most of the movie. With an all-star cast, including the aforementioned, along with Toni Collette, Michael Shannon, and Chris Evans, Knives Out is a well-crafted piece. A couple of criticisms could be that Plummer's character should have gotten more screen time, and perhaps that someone more memorable than Ana de Armas could have been cast as Marta. Still, Knives Out may be one to catch this holiday season, especially if you think your family is difficult. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Annie Sneed. Solar, wind, hydropower. These renewable energy sources are all much better for the climate than fossil fuels, right? Well, yes for wind and solar. But it turns out that the picture for hydropower is more complicated than we think. A new study by the Environmental Defense Fund analyzed the climate impacts of 1,500 hydropower facilities across the globe. That accounts for about half of hydropower generation worldwide. The researchers looked at whether a facility behaves as a greenhouse gas sink or as a source. To figure this out, they investigated all the different components that help determine a hydropower facility's greenhouse gas emissions.
There are so many factors that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions from hydropower, but essentially the majority of greenhouse gas emissions arise from the reservoir itself, as vegetation and soils are submerged underwater in the dam that is used for the hydropower generation.
Alyssa Acco, a senior climate scientist at the Environmental Defense Fund and co-author of the study. As the submerged vegetation decays, it releases methane, or CO2.
The larger the surface area of the reservoir, the more greenhouse gases that are going to be emitted from that reservoir. Also, the temperature plays a role as well. How warm the reservoir is will affect how much greenhouse gases are produced and emitted from the reservoir.
Through their analysis, Acco and her co-author Stephen Hamburg, also with the Environmental Defense Fund, discovered that the climate impacts of hydropower run the gamut. The good news is that some facilities perform just as well as wind and solar. But shockingly, more than 100 facilities are actually worse for the climate than fossil fuels. The study is in the journal Environmental Science and Technology. This finding doesn't mean we should forget about hydropower.
But we just need to be careful to make sure that we have climate benefits. There are a lot of situations where hydropower can be on par with wind and solar. So it really depends on the specific facility.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Annie Sneed.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash. But in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seat belts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest old, 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
What does the Constitution say should happen, must happen, after the House of Representatives impeaches a president? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Article 1 of the Constitution, which sets forth the powers of the Congress, says the Senate shall have the sole power to try impeachments, and, when sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. The oath that each senator must take in the impeachment trial of a president comes from the Senate's rules on impeachment and says this: I solemnly swear or affirm, in all things appertaining to the trial of, insert name, now pending, I will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws, so help me God. To do impartial justice, that's the requirement for each senator sitting as a trial juror, which means that each senator has the obligation to evaluate the evidence impartially and objectively and not politically, and to decide whether the president has committed a high crime or misdemeanor. High crime or misdemeanor being a term of art that means, in Hamilton's words, an abuse or violation of the public trust. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. That was the day that 8 women in Wilmar, Minnesota, stood up for their rights in the workplace. The women worked at the Wilmar Citizens National Bank. These women were paid considerably less than the male employees. The only female bank officer made $4,000 a year less than the men she supervised. Anger over the pay inequity came to a head when the women were told to train a new male hire. He would be their supervisor despite having less experience. He would also make more money. The women went to the bank president, Leo Persh, to discuss the unequal pay. Persh told the women, "We're not all equal, you know." He argued that men needed to be paid more because they paid for dates. For the women, this attitude was the last straw. They filed a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. They also formed a union. The Wilmar Bank Employees Association Local 1 became the first bank employees local in Minnesota. Negotiations with the bank went nowhere. The union decided to strike. Both the National Organization for Women and the United Auto Workers supported the strikers. For 2 long years, the strike wore on. The women picketed in the freezing Minnesota winters. They even lost friends over their stand. They became known as the Wilmar 8 and even saw their story turned into a made-for-TV movie by NBC. Despite the national attention, the bank refused to budge. The women ended the strike. Only one of the women went back to work for the bank, but she was demoted from her previous position and did not stay there long. And while the women did bring national attention to the issue of unequal pay, they paid a steep price for their courage. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 36 degrees Fahrenheit here at the mothership in Rogue River. And so we're going to have a mix of clouds and sun today. A tad warmer. We should get up to be about 48 to 49, which was a little warmer than over the weekend, which the rain dried up somewhat, though it's quite humid still. And we are expecting quite a bit of rain come late Tuesday, that's tomorrow, and early Wednesday. So some clouds tonight, overnight low about 30 to 32. Winds are out of the east. We'll be picking up in a couple of hours at 5 to 10 miles per hour, then shifting tonight out of the east-southeast, continuing at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then continuing tomorrow out of the same direction and the same clip. Looks like overcast tomorrow with a high in the mid-40s. So we are going into winter, at least here on the West Coast, Southern Oregon, to be specific. Pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 19 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is rated at 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.41 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 and partly cloudy. Paris is 54 and partly cloudy. Rome is 61 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 43 and partly cloudy. It's partly cloudy everywhere. Although Kabul is 34 with smoke, which you could probably say is partly cloudy with smoke. Hong Kong is 68 and fair. Tokyo is 48 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 65 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 44 degrees and fair. And New York is 36 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees, this time from Reuters, bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. government covertly moved to expel 2 officials from the Chinese embassy earlier this year after they drove onto a military base the New York Times reported, citing anonymous sources familiar with the matter. The newspaper reported on Sunday, that would be yesterday, that one of the two Chinese officials is believed to be an intelligence officer operating under diplomatic cover. The officials breached security at a base in Virginia this fall and only stopped after fire trucks were used to block their path. A law enforcement official familiar with the episode confirmed that the account in the New York Times is accurate. An FBI spokeswoman declined to comment. The State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the incident because, Pompeo's a dick. The Chinese Foreign Ministry and Chinese Embassy in Washington could not be immediately reached for comment. And why would they? It was Sunday. Though the exact reason for why the Chinese officials drove onto the base in Norfolk, Virginia was unknown, American officials believe it may have been to test security. Well, why not? I mean, look how many Arabs are killing people on base. When they finally stopped driving, the Chinese officials told the military guards they had gotten lost. Yeah, we drove right through that gate there with all that military stuff. We didn't know where we were. Weeks later, on the 16th of October, the State Department issued new rules on Chinese diplomats, which require them to notify the department before they have any meetings with local or state officials or with educational and research institutions. The U.S. in recent years has stepped up efforts to combat concerns about suspected spying by the Chinese. Suspected? My. Join the 21st century, why don't you?
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
And this final amuse-bouche comes our way out of Reuters by anonymous worker bees, of course. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, warned Prime Minister Boris Johnson that he could not keep Scotland in the United Kingdom against the country's will. Johnson and his government have repeatedly said they will not give the go-ahead for another referendum on Scottish independence. But Sturgeon said after the Scottish National Party won 48 of Scotland's 59 seats in the UK Parliament, her party has been given a mandate to have one. Oh, yeah. If he thinks saying no is the end of the matter, then he is going to find himself completely and utterly wrong. You cannot hold Scotland in the Union against its will. If the United Kingdom is to continue, it can only be by consent. And if Boris Johnson is confident in the case for the Union, then he should be confident enough to make the case and allow people to decide. Freedom! All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we are going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.